Purim Sameach, everybody. Shalom. This is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Sfat, Israel, and welcome to our Tour for the Nations Women's Online Gathering. Isn't that scary? So this week is Purim. Purim is Monday night and Tuesday here in Sfat. In Jerusalem, it's Monday night, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I'm going to tell you the story of Purim tonight, but on a surface level and the kid level, it's about a villain named Haman, and the kids make these, stomp their feet, boo, hiss whenever Haman's name is mentioned because he's the villain. And then there's a hero and a heroine, Mordecai and Esther, who saved the Jewish people. So that's basically surface level what it's about. We make these Haman cookies, I call them Hamantaschen cookies. They're shaped like little triangles. So either it's because Haman had a weird looking triangle hat, or because they represent Haman's ears. But in the story of Purim, we were not able to have ears to hear the warnings until Haman came along and wanted to do mass genocide on the Jewish people. So we have these cookies shaped in the shape of ears because before that everything was going in one ear, not the other. And finally, Haman shook us up enough that the Jewish people were crying out to God to save them. So tonight I'm going to tell you the story of Purim, and the story got very interesting to me when I started reading what was going on behind the scenes. And so I think you're going to hear a lot of things tonight that you may not know if you just read the story in Esther. A lot of the midrash, I'll tell you. But before we do that, I want you to picture something. I want you to picture yelling at your kids. Say yelling at your teenagers. And say you're just having this full-blown, why do you never listen to me? I tell you and I tell you and I tell you, and now look what's happened, and I tried to warn you, and you're just letting your kids have it, and you're having this full-blown war in your house. And a neighbor kid comes walking along and he hears all this yelling going on in your house. And let's just say the neighborhood kid comes in and just starts kicking your children. And you would just be like, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? Who are you? And he would be like, well, I heard all the yelling. I heard that you're obviously upset with your children. And I just thought, I would come in and maybe I should be your child instead of them. I mean, because obviously they're losers. I mean, obviously they caused you a lot of anger and everything. Maybe you want to replace them with me. Okay, so we all know that any parent would be like, this is an A-B conversation. See your way out the door. I mean, who's even talking to you? What? You would just think like, what egomaniac thinks he's just going to come into our family and see us going through a hard time, see that I'm yelling at my kids, and all of a sudden think that I'm going to be done with my kids and he's going to be like the new replacement for my kids. Okay, so it seems so silly, but this is the very thing that has happened. This actually was going on in the Purim story. This idea of replacement theology started right here in the Purim story. And I know that it was part of my life for years because I was told that the church was the replacement for Israel. The church was like the spiritual Israel. That I was reading that the Christian world and the church have believed that God forsook the Jewish people and replaced them with the church. Over the centuries, the church proclaimed itself the spiritual Israel, believing that it had supplanted the natural Israel. And that's what I was taught. That's what I believed for years. That one day all the Jewish people should convert to Christianity. And so the story of Purim is the story where everything gets flip-flopped and turned on its head. You look like everything's going one way, and then at the end, Haman thinks he's going to kill all the Jews, and in the end, Haman is the one. Haman and his family are the ones that are killed instead. And this thing about, evangelical Christians like I was, were thinking, we got to send missionaries to the Jews. The Jews have to convert to Christianity. And it's something that's going on in the world. It's kind of a flip-flop situation now, because a lot of us are converting to Judaism, or a lot of us are leaving Christianity and becoming Noahites. So who'd have thought? So this idea is right there in the beginning of the story. The Jewish people had been told by God that they were to be a light to the nations. And part of what they needed to do was they needed to go to Jerusalem and build a house, build a temple. It was a house of prayer for all nations, and that was their role in the world, that they were to lead all of the nations to God. And so they did that. They built the Solomon's temple. They built the first holy temple in Jerusalem, and it was up for like 400 years. And then the Babylonians came, the enemies came, which is modern day Iraq. So Iraqis came into Israel and burnt down the temple in Jerusalem. So after that, it was kind of like, okay, God had been telling them, that because of all of your wrongdoings, I'm going to let, your enemies come. The prophets had prophesied, the temple's going to be destroyed because you're not acting right. You're not doing what God told you to do. And so you see this downfall, this breakdown in the relationship between God and the Jewish people, and the enemies come in and the temple's burnt down. And so it's kind of like, okay, so now what? Now what? Is God done with the Jews? Is there a replacement? Is there somebody else? But Jeremiah the prophet had said that in 70 years, you're going to go back to Jerusalem and you're going to build the second temple. You're going to rebuild the house. And so at the time of the Purim Story, Persians had taken over. That's like modern day Iran. So Iran takes over the world now. First Iraq, and then it's Iran. So first Babylonia, and then Persia. So Persia has taken over the world, and the Jews are still not back home in Jerusalem. But the king, Ahasuerus, he knew about this prophecy that in 70 years they were supposed to go back and rebuild the temple. And he figured, according to his calculations, during the third year of his reign, it would be the 70 years, and when that year came, nothing happened. So he had miscalculated by about 14 years, I think. But anyway, he thought, well, the 70 years is up, and the Jews are still here. And so obviously, it must mean that they're never going back, and that God is done with them, and, I'm the replacement. So it says here that this King Ahasuerus, he held his feast, and he was trying to tell the Jews that they should just give up hope about going back and building the temple, and that now they had an alternative, his kingdom. So he dressed up as the high priest, and he wanted to show them, I'm your new leader. And here's all the temple vessels. You're not going to need them anymore. There's no point in waiting any longer. You're not going to go back there. You're not going to rebuild. And so what did the Jewish people think about this? Unfortunately, they accepted his message. And so they willfully joined in his party, and they even drank from the temple vessels, which means they had just given up hope of ever going back to Jerusalem and ever fulfilling their role as a light to the nations. And so they terminated their desire for a second temple, and they turned to a new future. I just remember being told, this is the Old Testament, this is the New. And so I see the words here, and it was like, well, that was then, yes, you had your temple, but this is now. There's something new in the world. This is what they thought. And so that they should just be loyal subjects to the king and his empire. And so what they did in effect was they gave up their unique role as a light to the nations. And what they didn't realize is that their whole reason for existing, their whole right to exist, was because of that role. They accepted that agreement with God that they would be a light to the nations. And when they said, okay, that was then, this is now, and this is what they did not realize, is that the Jewish people's whole right to existence is based on their unique role in the world. Hashem cherishes the Jewish people because of its willingness to serve as the light to the nations, who teaches the world to know Him. So that was their role, and they weren't doing it. And says now that they did not want to assume that unique role, they automatically forsook their right to exist, if you can imagine. So the decree comes from heaven that the Jews have forsaken their right to exist. Okay? So King Ahasuerus is very happy to be the replacement. He's very happy that they're not going back to Jerusalem, he thinks. And so he has this big party. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you about some of the characters. The king, he was a stable boy. And so he rose to power by being very corrupt, by having people assassinated. But because of that, he was very paranoid himself, always looking over his shoulder, always wondering who his true friends were because of the way that he rose to power. But now Vashti, his queen, she was born a princess. Her grandfather was King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, and her father was Belshazzar, so she was a natural-born princess. And so everybody was pretty impressed when King Ahasuerus marries a real princess. She was like his claim to fame. So now you have to picture at this party, another thing you should know that is kind of behind the scenes is the king has this like friend named Haman. Haman, the villain. Haman and Vashti don't get along, and Haman and Vashti's wife, Haman's wife, Zeresh, and Vashti don't get along. And Haman and his wife have a daughter that they would like to be the queen. So Haman has it out for Vashti, but of course, he's very sly, and he doesn't just come out and say he has it out for Vashti. He doesn't come out and say that he wants his daughter to be the queen, and he wants the king to get rid of Vashti. So when they're having this drunken party, Haman sees an opportunity, and he gets things kind of stirred up, and he's like, hey guys, Queen Vashti, the king's always bragging about her and how beautiful she is, why don't we see if he'll get her to come to our party and dance for us, And pretty soon he's got everybody going, Vashti, Vashti, Vashti. And so it's like, he's just stirring the pot. And so the king is kind of like, okay, because, the king wants everybody to like him. He wants everybody to be happy. And all the guys are saying, we want to see Vashti. And the king sends, he says, go tell Vashti to come to our drunken party and dance for us wearing nothing but her crown. Which that right there, that's the first thing that's pretty much unheard of. You have your unkosher entertainment of like the harem girls or whatever, but like the queen, that's not her role to dance for the commoners. The queen is very noble, she's very prestigious, she's supposed to be honored, and so it's just such a strange thing that a king would ask his queen to come and entertain the common folk. It's just like it doesn't happen. So that's the first, we wear these masks because there's like all these coincidences that happen, all of these, a string of strange things that happen in this story that it's not till you look back and you see all of them, you put them all together, that you see that God is orchestrating this. But the whole Purim story happens over a period of 9 or 10 years. So you think of 9 or 10 years in your life, you don't actually put everything together as it's happening. So this is the very first strange thing that happens, that the king actually requests the queen to come dance for the common people, the common guys at his party. So of course she says, are you kidding? Seriously? And she says no, and really that should have been the end of it. He should have sobered up and realized he never should have asked her to come, and that should have been the end of it. But now Haman, he gets the guys and they're like, ooh, she told you, you look weak. And Haman starts making a big deal. Haman starts like stirring the pot. He's like making a problem where there's not really a problem. He's like, well, this could be really bad. These guys are going to go home and their wives are going to disrespect them. I mean, these are your taxpayers. These are your loyal, militaries here. I mean, you can't let them down. And so he's playing on Ahasuerus' Achilles' heel. Ahasuerus wants everybody to like him. The last thing he wants is to upset, all these people he's having the party for. And Haman makes him believe, boy, if you don't do something right now, boy, if you don't get rid of Vashti, boy, this is going to be really bad. Okay, and so this is what Haman was really good at, like kind of just character assassination was his thing. So it turns out, here's the second unheard of thing. The guy who was the stable boy who rose to power in a very corrupt way, he has the true princess vanished, executed. So Vashti's gone. So now there's an opening for a new queen, and we already know that Haman has a daughter that he wants to be the queen. So Haman suggests that they have a beauty contest. And this beauty contest, this is another unheard of thing. Like, what king ever has a beauty contest and marries one of the common women? It's always like the king wants to marry a queen, or someone of royal stock. And so this is another very strange thing, that they would just open this up to whoever. And this beauty contest goes on for like a couple of years. And so of course Haman wants his daughter. She's a front runner in this contest. And the king has like 7 cabinet members. It starts out where Haman is like low man on the totem pole. But everybody knows, that Haman, he's got the king in his back pocket. He knows how to work the king. And if Haman's daughter ever becomes the queen, these guys are like, we have to find a contestant that can beat Haman's daughter. We cannot let this power-hungry guy have his daughter as the next queen. And so here's where 2 more characters come into the story. There's Mordecai and Esther. They're Jews. They're cousins. And they know the day is coming because every single woman in all these 127 provinces were supposed to try out for this position. So there's millions of contestants. And so Esther has to go and try out for the beauty pageant. And Mordecai tells her, whatever you do, don't tell them who your family is. So all of the contestants are going, I'm from Ethiopia, and I'm from India, I'm from Jordan, they're all representing some province. And so when it comes to Esther, well, Esther, who are you? Who are your people? And she's just like, oh, I just love everybody. I'm just Mother Persia. And so the king is like, oh, wow, this could work. This is what I need. I need like a queen that will just unify my whole kingdom. And so Esther becomes a favorite, and everybody gets behind her because she's the one person that can beat out Haman's daughter. So Esther is chosen as the queen. This is another thing in a string of like millions of contestants, and Esther wins this contest. Okay, so Esther goes and she tells the king, the other king, King Nebuchadnezzar, he had a Jewish prophet as one of his advisors. Maybe you should have a Jewish prophet or a Jewish wise man as one of your advisors. And the king said, because King Nebuchadnezzar had Daniel. And the king said, well, I don't know, what Jewish man should I have? And so, of course, Esther said, well, there's Mordecai. Mordecai is very wise and loyal and pious. And so the king meets Mordecai, and the king gives Mordecai a position in his cabinet. Well, right away, there's two guys that are very unhappy about this because Mordecai, the Jew, is over them. So they start plotting. They plot that they're going to poison the king. And everyone will say, well, look, nothing ever happened to the king until this Jew got put in charge, and then Mordecai would be blamed for the downfall of the king. So they don't. Here's another coincidence. Mordecai happens to be in the right place at the right time, and he overhears these two talking that they're about to put poison in the king's drink. And Mordecai knows a lot of different languages. They don't know he's there. They don't know anybody can understand their language, and he understands perfectly what they're about to do. And so he goes and he tells Esther, you've got to warn the king that these two men are about to poison him. So Esther gets a message to the king on behalf of Mordecai, and sure enough, when the king wakes up and he's ready to have his drink, bring in the drink, and the king gets the drink checked for poison, and Mordecai was right, and these two men were executed. And it was written down in the Chronicles that Mordecai the Jew saved the king's life. Now, usually, if someone saves the king's life, here's another strange thing. That person is rewarded in a huge way, like they're given a huge piece of land, or they're given $1 million, or gold, or whatever, like they're set for life. And for some reason, nothing was done for Mordecai. But it was written down in the book, and this comes into play later. So first of all, Mordecai's in the right place at the right time. He understands what they're saying. He is able to get a message to the king. He saves the king's life. And then he's not rewarded. Unheard of. Okay, so we see that the king has two friends. He's got Haman and he's got Mordecai. And you can't get like two more opposite people. And Haman is a Jew hater, Mordecai is head of the Jews. And what happens is, if Haman is up, Mordecai is down. If Mordecai is up, Haman is down. But they cannot both be equal. So Haman is rising in power. And in the same way that he got rid of Vashti, by just making a big thing out of nothing, telling us half-truth, he starts to figure out how he's going to get rid of Mordecai. Because what had happened was, Haman rises to power, and the king gives this decree that everybody has to bow to Haman. And Mordecai's not about to bow to Haman, and Haman cannot stand Mordecai. But of course he can't just go to the king and say, I can't stand Mordecai, can I just have all the Jews killed? He has to kind of be a little bit more subtle than that. He has to say things in such a way that he looks like he's really concerned about the king's best interest. And so it says, it did not take the sly Haman long to work out a scheme by which he hoped to destroy all the Jews in the 127 provinces of King Ahasuerus. And he lost no time compiling a long list. See, this fake news was going on back then. Compiling a long list of false accusations against the Jews, intermingled with a few truths and half-truths. And this is what Haman is an expert at. Character assassination is his thing. He's got it. And so he makes it appear genuine to the king. And so Haman proceeded to slander and malign the Jews. And he says, they keep themselves apart from everyone, and they just live amongst themselves, and they eat and drink amongst themselves, and they don't mingle with the rest of the people, and they don't marry our daughters. and they're really just good for nothing. They're lazy. They're always having a holiday. They've got the Shabbat, they've got Pesach, they've got Shavuot, Sukkot, and so the king gives him permission that he can just get rid of all the Jewish children, their mothers, their fathers, mass genocide. So Haman draws lots, and the day that he's going to kill all the Jews is Adar 13, which is 11 months away. So Mordecai finds out that this is the plan, that in 11 months, on Adar 13, mass genocide for all the people. And he gets his clothes and he's just like, no, and he tears his clothes. And what happens right away is that the Jewish people, that nobody is waiting 11 months. It gets totally where people are going in and robbing their businesses, raping their women, and when they try to call the police or the authorities, the police don't come. Because the idea is like, hey, you guys are going to be dead in 11 months anyways. So it doesn't really wait 11 months for this to kick in. It starts right away. And so Mordecai, he starts to connect the dots now. And he says, okay, I know why Esther is in the palace. I know why Esther won the beauty contest. I know why, now I see it's for this purpose right here. And so he goes to Esther and he tells her what's going on out in the streets. And she's scared to death because she saw, what happened to Vashti. And she's like, okay. She finally, she says, okay. And she says, tell everybody to not eat or drink for 3 days. And so this was not an easy thing for Mordecai to do, because the Jews are scattered throughout 127 provinces, and Passover is coming, and Passover is usually when the Jews get together and have a feast, a big meal. And he says, no Passover this year. We're not having a meal. We need everybody to fast and pray for 3 days and 3 nights. And so even the children, everybody is crying out to God. And Esther and her maidens, they all fast and pray for 3 days and 3 nights. And it says, Mordecai gathered around him the Jewish children from all the Jewish schools, and sitting in sackcloth and ashes in the manner of mourners, the children raised their voices in weeping and prayer to God day and night. And when God saw those innocent children and heard their heartbreaking prayers, he was filled with mercy. And he said, for the sake of the children, I will save my people. Okay, so Esther puts on, after the 3 days, she puts on her royal garments. And now the king, he's so paranoid that somebody wants to kill him. And of course there was the 2 that wanted to poison him, so for good reason. He has it set up to where you cannot come anywhere near him without him, allowing you to come in. And anybody that tries to come and he doesn't allow them can be killed, and Esther knows this. And a lot of Haman's sons worked for the king, and when they saw Esther appear, they were secretly happy. They thought, oh, wow, Esther's dead. They thought, here she came, uninvited, unannounced, and they thought, she's dead. Good. Now our sister can be the next queen. But instead, they were so disappointed because the king was like, oh, Esther. And he welcomed her. And he's like, wow, you risked your life to come talk to me. What's up? What do you need? And she said, oh, Esther has this plan that is just amazing in every way. They call it like a martial arts move in a way, because in martial arts, it's like if your opponent is stronger than you, the way that you win over a stronger opponent is you get like all of their force coming at you, and then you simply step out of the way, and then they, all of their own strength is used against them. So she does this little psychological thing, kind of, I call it the two's company, three's the crowd plan. She says to the king, well, I haven't been with you in so long, and I really want you to come to a banquet, just you and me. Oh, and Haman. You, me, and Haman. Okay, and so the king's like, oh, okay, me and you and Haman, okay. And so he's just really, really curious. And you know how they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? And so Esther is thinking, I want Haman right where I can see him. And another thing is, the Jewish people, when they found out that the Queen Esther was having a meal with Haman, they thought, oh no, she switched sides. She's not even for us. And she knew that they would think that, and that they would cry out to God even more, which they did. So Esther is at the feast with the king and Haman, and they're so curious. The king is like, now Esther, come on, you risked your life. What is it that you want? I'll give you up to half my kingdom. And so she says, what I want is tomorrow. Tomorrow I want you to come again, and I'll tell you tomorrow. And so a couple more coincidences happen before the next night. Haman is pretty much on top of the world. He's the only one that's been invited to this private little party. His ego is just huge. He leaves the party, and who does he run into but Mordecai the Jew, who he cannot stand. And Mordecai will not bow to him. Now Haman has an evil wife, and so he goes, the little evil couple, and Haman tells his evil wife, boy, I have everything going for me. I'm at the party. I'm having a great time. And what happens? I run into Mordecai, and I just want him dead. I can't wait the 11 months. I just want him dead. He's just ruining everything for me. And so his evil wife, she gets this idea. She says, well, just get a work crew and just build a gallows, 10 stories high. And by morning, you just go in, and the king, he's going to give you whatever you want. You're like his best friend. And you just tell the king that you want Mordecai to hang on the gallows. Well, he loves the idea. He gets a crew together. They build this gallows 10 stories high. So then the king left the party, and he couldn't sleep. And he asked his servants to bring him something to read. And so what do they coincidentally bring him to read? But he opens up the Chronicles that's talk about, right to the page that's talking about how Mordecai had saved his life. So here's the king in the middle of the night. He's kind of like, wow, does Esther really love me? Is she having an affair with Haman? Are they both plotting to kill me? Do I have any true friends? He's just like, what's going on? This is strange. She invites me and Haman to this dinner, and then she wants me and Haman to come tomorrow night, and I don't know. I don't even know who to trust anymore. And he opens up and he sees that Mordecai was loyal to him, and Mordecai saved his life. And he said, did we ever do anything for Mordecai? Did we ever reward him? And they're like, nope. And he's like, what? I have this guy that's loyal to me, that saves my life. What is this? This is crazy. I never rewarded him. And so right then, Haman, who's very confident, thinks he can just show up at the king's door any time of night, and ask him a favor. He's on top of the world, so he comes strolling in, and the king's like, oh, Haman. He says to Haman, if I wanted to reward someone, how would I, and honor someone, how should I do it? And Haman says about the worst thing somebody could possibly say to a paranoid king. He says, Haman, of course, thinks that the king wants to honor him. And Haman, consciously or subconsciously, wants the king's life. He wants to be the next king. And it just comes out. He just says, well, whoever you want to honor, basically make him king for a day. Let him wear your robe and your crown and ride your horse. And the king's just looking at Haman like, okay, Haman, I think I got your number. I think I'm getting who you are. But he says, okay, well, that sounds good. Go and do that for Mordecai. And Haman's just like, wait, what? You know, and what do you mean for Mordecai? And he's like, well, you know, Mordecai saved my life and I never rewarded him. And Haman's like, well, can't you just give him, you know, $1 million or gold or something? And the king's like, yeah, do that too. And also do this idea that you had. It says, here's what Haman had said. Let them bring the royal raiment that the king wore, and the horse that the king rode upon, and the royal crown should be placed on his head. And let the raiment and the horse be delivered into the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, and let them dress the man whom the king wishes to honor. So Haman has to go, and he has to shave Mordecai, and he has to just dress his arch enemy and parade him through town, which this really helped the Jewish people, because remember, everybody thought the king hated the Jews, and the police weren't coming when the Jews called them to come. So now all of a sudden there's this switcheroo going on, and this is the man that the king wants to honor, and it's Mordecai the Jew. So that really helped their situation, because now the police would come when they were called. Oh, okay, now the king is in favor of the Jews. They just didn't know, but that's the kind of king he was. He kind of flip-flopped a lot. Okay, so Haman has pretty much the worst day of his life, and he has to honor Mordecai. And it just is going to go. One of the things that we're told, though, also, is that when Haman went to find Mordecai to honor him, Mordecai was studying the Torah, and Haman asked him, what are you studying? And Mordecai said, I'm studying all the things that are going to go on in our temple when we rebuild the temple. And right there, Haman knew he was about to go down and Mordecai was about to go up, because as soon as, you know, that meant that the Jews had repented, and the Jews wanted to be right with God again, and they wanted their role back, and they wanted to go and rebuild their temple, and they didn't want to be in Persia. They saw where that got them. And so they cried out to God, and it's like, we want to be the light to the nations. We want to build the temple. And so one of the things they started doing was reading about all the practices that were going to go on in the temple. So when Haman saw this, he said he saw that Mordecai was teaching about laws that only apply when the temple is standing. He realized that the Jewish people had done repentance, and that they had reignited their desire for a new temple, and that they still had hope, and that they could continue in their unique role as the light to the nations. And consequently, Haman knew that if they had not given up on Hashem, then he would not give up on them. So here's the turning point. So now it's the second night of the party, and Haman, he's all proud that he gets to go to the party, and he's the only one, just the king and Esther and him. And at the beginning of the story, there's the king and the queen and Haman. It's like two's company, three's a crowd. But Haman manages to get rid of the queen. Now here we are, there's the king and the queen and Haman, and we're going to see the queen. No, actually the queen just steps out of the way and lets the king get rid of Haman. So she tells the king at this party that she's Jewish, and Haman is accused of wanting to murder her along with all her people. And then Haman starts begging for mercy, and the king comes in and sees him like in this precarious position, and he accuses him of attempting rape on his wife. And so things can't possibly look worse for Haman. And then comes the clincher. The gallows that he had erected for Mordecai he finds them put to an unexpected use when he himself is sentenced to death. And so the Jews whom he had wanted to wipe off the face of the earth, rather than being annihilated, are given the king's permission to annihilate their enemies. Okay, so everything does a flip-flop at the end. It looks like it's going one way. It looks like Haman's going to have his way and all the Jews are going to die. And in the end, Haman and his 10 sons are killed. And so at the end of the story, we read the Jews had light and joy and gladness and honor. And in every province and in every city, wherever the king's order and his edict reached, there was joy and gladness for the Jews, a banquet and a festive day. And many of the peoples of the land became Jews, because the fear of the Jews was upon them. So when it says that there was light, the light means like enlightenment. They had realized their mistake. They had realized that their mistake in wanting to just be Persian citizens, and they realized that unless God is the king, a human king can just change on a dime. A human king, you could be doing everything right, you could be paying your taxes, you could be a good citizen, and this king could just decide that you all should die, mass genocide. And so the only hope that the Jewish people had, and they came to realize, was that they needed to live in God's kingdom, under his laws, under his protection, and that's the only way that they would have to stick together, and that they would have to just repent and to get back in good relationship with God. And in the meantime, nobody is replacing them. King Ahasuerus didn't replace them, the church doesn't replace them, and this is the real flip-flop story for a lot of us, is that, we're in the church and we're thinking that the Jews need to convert to Christianity, and instead, a lot of us Christians are converting, are leaving Christianity, are turning back to the Torah, are following the 7 Noahide laws, or converting to Judaism like I did 2 years ago, right about this time. And so there's a prophecy in Ezekiel, and God is talking about the temple, and he says, "You, son of man, describe the house which you saw in a vision, the house of Israel, so that they will be reminded of the temple that was destroyed, and they will be ashamed of their iniquities, which caused its destruction, and let them think in their hearts the dimensions of the future house which is ready to be built." Okay, and so what the plan is, see, we don't have a temple standing right now, but we're always reading about everything that's going to go on in the temple. And God says that just by reading about it, and just by planning it, and just by thinking about what we're going to do, that's like having the temple. And so that's how we make repentance with God. That's how we get back right with God again. And so anyways, yeah, you could open up your Bible and you could see all through it, God's angry with the Jews. And just like I told you to imagine, you're yelling at your kids, and it's just going on like, whoa, look over here. They're building the golden calf, and look over here. They kidnapped their brother and sold him as a slave, and they're over here, and they're always doing something. And so it would be easy to assume that God is done with the Jews. And we find out, but that doesn't say much about God. God is not saying, it's not about whether they deserve to be my children or not. I'm God, and we're going through a hard time right now, but, if they repent, we're back on again. And so the Jewish people are still here against all odds, and with another holiday of Purim. So Purim Sameach, that's what's going on here in the land right now. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you liked all the backdrop stuff that was going on. And love all the different flip-flops that go on even for you and me in our life. All right, that's all for now. Shalom from Israel.